Flute, 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 flute. You know it. Men at work down under, traveling in a fried-out Combe on a hippie trail. It's full of zombie. I met a strange lady. She made me nervous. She took me in and gave me breakfast. I dedicate this episode to the ever-patient Ben Frasca and the ever-fabulously coiffed Deb Bradley. Welcome to the Albums That Saved Us. Albums that saved us are made by bands that saved us. One of the bands that saved me was Men at Work. Technically only 3 studio albums and a fall from the biggest band in the world to Where Are They Now status. But they were early groundbreakers in first stage new wave and a huge spike on my very early musical landscape. A bit back in town, I saw a man working and he had a Men at Work shirt on that could have been a Men at Work shirt. He was a man at work, and it was a neon shirt that literally said Men at Work on the back. It worked because it brought me back to those fabulous early 80s. If you've been following along, and I hope that you have, as there is a test at the end, whenever that may be, you probably know that Kiss was the first band I got into, largely based around one album, Double Platinum. I think from 1976 to the very early 80s, my musical landscape was a bit of a mishmash of disco, movie soundtracks, 8 tracks in my biological father's muscle car, and then, of course, along came MTV. Of course, MTV got me into Duran Duran, one of the early music video pioneers, but before that, MTV got me into a new wave band of a slightly different type. A band from Australia called Men at Work. I can firmly say Men at Work was the first band I really got into, became a fan of, wanted to learn more about, devoured lyric sheets and liner notes by, and even learned the band members' names, including the drummer. Of course, MTV helped with all this. The first Men at Work album, Business as Usual, came out in November of 1981 down under in Aussie land, and then in April of 82 in the US. By then, they were all over MTV with interesting and quirky videos for songs like Who Can It Be Now, Down Under, and Be Good Johnny. All also huge international hits for the band. They seemed to explode into the musical consciousness, and the fact that they were all over MTV fueled the fire. MTV showed the videos, interviews, news, ran concerts, or a concert. Nickelodeon also had a cool concert show and ran bands like Men at Work, Duran Duran, Culture Club, and more. MTV and Nickelodeon might have run the same show, but I think it was 2 different concerts. Might have been 2 different tours. I don't know. It was a long time ago. I even remember Men at Work headlining New Wave Day at the US Festival, probably the pinnacle for the band. The music videos created an interesting dichotomy for the band and maybe had some not take them seriously as musicians. Obviously, 3 huge hits off a debut album is amazing, but the deeper tracks have so much more. I'd imagine that my intro to Men at Work was the Who Can It Be Now video. Obviously, a catchy song and quirky video. At least in their singles and early on, Men at Work had their tongues firmly planted in their cheeks. But if you dug deeper, you'd see so much more to them. For me, they were an early new wave band in tune with the early 80s new wave of bands like The Cars and even The Police. I've always thought Men at Work were very Police-esque and just not on the same musical level, evolution, or musical complexity. Men at Work had great catchy songs and heavy drums, enough for me at first, but they were definitely deeper. Men at Work's classic debut with those early hits we all know, probably on every 80s playlist, was, of course, Business as Usual. They followed up fairly quickly with Cargo, which is a great album, but it's almost like Men at Work trying to be Men at Work. It does have arguably their best song in Overkill, which I didn't like at the time as it didn't sound like Men at Work to me. They did release a last final studio album years later, which was a bit fragmented, inconsistent, and pieced together from remnants of the original band's lineup. But Two Hearts is still a good album and worth a listen if you're a fan. But let's talk about Business as Usual, the debut album from Men at Work. I was 12 years old when it came out. My dad was in the Army. We were living on a Marine base in the middle of the desert in Barstow, California. If you've ever driven to Vegas, it's where you stop to go pee, get a bite, stretch your legs, or all three. On military bases, you have these stores called PXs, postal exchanges. They're little on-base stores that sell a little bit of everything, even music. So now and again, I'd hike from our house on base through a strip of the desert on the base to the PX to get a book or a record. I don't know if I made a specific trip to get business as usual or if I happened to be there and saw it, but I likely had to make the watch out for snakes, scorpions, etc. hike through a mini swatch of desert to get there. I'd later buy Men at Work's second album, Cargo, there on cassette as well. Two Hearts was years later and a surprise. A new Men at Work album? Also on cassette, but I digress. Men at Work, business as usual. This is one of the first few albums I bought before it was easy to lose track. How I loved this new wavy band from Australia that at one point seemed to be the biggest band in the world, at least in 82 or 83. Their singer Colin Hay had a lazy eye. Wacky. What's he looking at? I don't know. Is he looking at me? Maybe. Following a band was a bit more of an effort before the internet, having to pore over album notes and get news where and when you could in the print media. I really like the sound of this band. Nice new wavy mid-tempo rock with keyboards and sax and flute courtesy of Greg Ham, but also a little ska or reggae feel, almost. When I really got into the Police, some of their early stuff reminded me of Men at Work. I also really like the drumming of Men at Work's Jerry Spicer. He's no Stuart Copeland, but who is? Obviously the singles stand out, but I think every song on this album is solid and it flows well. There's some slower tracks, still with that solid feel that translated well live, at least on TV. The down-tempo songs still had great drumming. Underground was the fourth single, but didn't get as much notice as the earlier singles, but still a good track. Other standouts for me included Helpless Automaton, very Mr. Roboto themed, the Losing Your Love, I Can See It in Your Eyes, and the closers Catch a Star and Down by the Sea, which were really nice slow burners and very good live tracks. I'm a sucker for sappy love songs. I Can See It in Your Eyes is one of those breakup songs. Who wants to break up? Wait, I can see it in your eyes. I dream of the ships at sea on a stormy night. I wish that it was me, but I wake in fright. I realize I can see it in your eyes. I've only got myself to blame. I always really liked Helpless Automaton featuring Ham on vocals. Another love song, but very futuristic, crossing over into robot territory. He loves her. He's a robot. What are they going to do? Hey, it's true. I'm a helpless automaton, making ultimatum to you. It's true. Machinery in my pocket. I even got a docket for you. Oh, I get it. And don't forget Touching the Untouchables either. Hello to you, my sweet young friends. Have you got some money perhaps you could lend? I'll wash my leather face in the afternoon sun. My shirt's torn, my time's near done. The success of Business as Usual earned Men at Work the Best New Artist Grammy of 1982. The follow-up album, Cargo, was recorded in the summer of 82, but its release was delayed by the record company due to the success of Business as Usual. You don't want to make too much money at once, I guess. Cargo's good and nearly as quirky, with arguably the band's best song, Overkill, and more of the quirkiness and more of the wacky singles and videos as well. It's almost like we do quirky songs and videos, but the album tracks go deeper. Cargo peaked at number 3 on the US charts and produced 2 top 10 singles, Overkill and It's a Mistake. It's a Mistake was very Men at Worky and featured another quirky video, as did the single Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive. This is the story of Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive. They are a person who feels good to be alive. He loves the world, except for all the people. Indeed. Overkill was a departure for Men at Work. When it first came out, I didn't like it. The video was very serious, and the song was a little mellower and serious. But now I think it's perhaps my favorite Men at Work song. I'm mellow and serious now. Maybe that's it. It's got that big key change spot that kills karaokeers everywhere. That drunk dude up there mumbling through it. You're on the edge of your seat waiting to see if he can hit that note, And then that drum lean in is classic Men at Work. Hold my beer. I can't get to sleep. I think about the implications of diving in too deep and possibly the complications, especially at night. I worry over situations that I know will be all right. It's just overkill. That's why I'm a drummer. During this phase, the band did big shows and tours, and then after that, things fragmented. The band had toured extensively for the first two albums and then co-headlined the US Festival with The Clash and the Stray Cats. From there, they took a break, causing drummer Jerry Spicer and bassist John Rees to quit the band. They were no longer men working. After the break in 1984, what was left of the band got back together to record the Two Hearts album. There was a lot of tension in the band. The bass player and drummer had left the band or were kicked out prior to recording, and eventually the guitar player Ron Strykert left during recording. So it was basically Hay and Ham left with session musicians. I thought it was a decent album, though a bit choppy and inconsistent. From there, live albums, best of albums, pseudo reunion tours, Where Are They Now, Colin Hay solo acoustics at the Winery, and eventually Greg Ham had a very sad, lonely death in his condo. I think Two Hearts deserves more credit than it gets and would have been much better received if the band hadn't basically broken up before and during its recording. In retrospect, it's probably part Colin Hay's first solo album and the studio swan song from Men at Work, as there are a couple of Men at Work tracks on there from the classic mold. Some great lyrics on here, like in the pseudo title track Man with Two Hearts. Like a man who has one hand, still he does what he can. Shows he is twice the man you are. Deep. Everything I Need is a lovely little love song. Great addition to mixed tapes everywhere, or maybe even Spotify playlists no one listens to. But still, when I'm falling down deeper than the underground, my thoughts race back to you again and again. My babe, she gives me everything. She gives me everything I need. Sail to You, definitely a Men at Work song for me. Part of the Two Hearts of this album, get it? I did a play on the album title there, the dichotomy of saying it's a Colin Hay solo album and a Men at Work album, you see. Maybe that's why they called it Two Hearts themselves. They figured it out years before I did. But anyway, Stay at Home, Hard Luck Story, Snakes and Ladders, Still Life could be fillers on any other Men at Work album. Maybe not singles, but definitely album tracks. Listen, I still love this band and can sing all the songs super loud in the car. I never saw them live and have no Men at Work stories besides the nomadic wandering through the desert to seek out their albums. Men at Work always reminded me of the Police and Cars, very early 80s new wave with a little more tongue-in-cheek. I can also see some Fix in there, maybe some Romantics with even some of the mischievousness of Oingo Boingo. I really liked the Men at Work sound, the jangly guitars, heavy but solid and simple drums, lots of rolls and ride cymbal, some nice keys, sax, and even flute adding to the layers, and of course the lyrics. The singles were largely fun, but that wasn't all that Men at Work were about to me. Solid musicianship, but definitely fun as well. But a good groove and a good beat I can dance to. So that's my take on Men at Work and Business as Usual, a classic album of the early 80s and cementing Men at Work in 80s playlists everywhere, where you're more than likely to hear Who Can It Be Now and Down Under and quite possibly Be Good Johnny. Maybe even Overkill or It's a Mistake. Hope you enjoyed this Men at Work discussion with myself. Let me know if you've got anything to add, disagree, or whatever. Thanks for listening to the albums that saved us. And Thanks for listening to the albums that saved us. And thanks to Anchor for helping me get started. Visit my sponsors, and if you're inclined to donate to help the cause, maybe I'll buy a record or something, or a bark collar. Find me at #albumsthatsaved us. Email me at albumsthatsavedus@gmail.com with feedback, criticism, ideas, albums, or bands you want to hear or talk about, or dog training tricks. Join the conversation on Facebook at facebook.com/albums that saved us podcast. And there's a Facebook group as well called Albums That Saved Us. On Twitter, Albums That Saved Us was taken, so it's Albums That Saved. On Instagram at Albums That Saved Us. On TikTok, where I'm dancing in crop tops and yoga pants, Albums That Saved Us. On YouTube at Albums That Saved Us. And if you have any album suggestions, bands you want to talk about, let me know. I don't know what's coming up next week or in a month or two. I haven't decided yet. If you like Albums That Saved Us, please also help spread the word. Tell your friends, and they'll tell 2 friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. Share the links, tell some friends, call in and leave a comment or a question. See the option in Anchor. All right, thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time. And be sure to revisit Men at Work and especially Business as Usual.